Muito boa tarde, senhoras e senhores, meninos e meninas. Queria agradecer a presença de todos aqui para a nossa palestra da nossa incrível convidada internacional. Antes da gente começar, eu queria dar algumas dicas para vocês terem um final feliz, no bom sentido, dessa palestra. A primeira coisa que eu queria pedir para vocês, uma salva de palmas para o time de produção e interpretação, para as nossas intérpretes. Porque sem eles, isso não acontece, vocês não vão entender nada, ou quem entende inglês, a Rosie, essa palestra vai ser feita em língua inglesa, então daqui a pouco eu vou virar na minha chavinha. A segunda dica para vocês é: baixem o jogo Shadows Edge. Isso vai ser muito importante no final da palestra. É muito importante que vocês tenham esse jogo baixado no celular de vocês. Quem tiver um smartphone, baixem um jogo chamado Shadows Edge. Muito, muito fundamental e importante. E, em terceiro lugar, eu queria apresentar a nossa palestrante. Depois eu vou cuidar das perguntas, vou provocar um pouco vocês, vai ser bem interessante a conversa hoje. Então eu vou mudar minha chavinha. So I would like to introduce our amazing speaker for this afternoon, Rosemary Lokhorst. Did I speak this spell correctly? Okay. So she's amazing. She is doing along with her studio and producing company, an amazing work in social impact games. So, we're very, very fortunate to have her here this afternoon to talk to you about, if Graffiti and Guardians is gaming the new pill. Is it, Rosie? So
you'll find out.
So let's find out.
All right. So my name's Rosemary, as you said. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to be here to speak to you about a topic that's very close to my heart. So what I'll do first is I will use myself as an example of one of our players. Because 20 years ago, I was shopping with my sister, and I had a rash on my arm. Don't ask me why I remember that day specifically. Probably because shopping with my sister is hell, and I hardly ever do it. But anyways, we went into the pharmacy, and we bought some antihistamine, and everything went away. So I thought, fine, that's that. But only 3 weeks later, I was sitting at my desk, and I was a coder at the time for a software company. And everything started to return. So I had a rash not only on my arm, but also in my face. My lips started swelling up. My eyes started swelling shut. And in the end, my boss had to call an ambulance to deliver me to the hospital. At the hospital, they did various tests. They found nothing. So in the end, they gave me a shot of cortisone, and then they sent me back home. What I didn't know then was that was going to last for more than 2 years. Every day, my skin felt like 1,000 bugs biting me over and over until I was really ready to just rip my skin off. It was almost worse than pain, so the only thing that I could do was take boiling hot showers every 15 minutes to try and get it numb enough so that I could maybe even sleep a little bit. And needless to say, the sleep deprivation over months and months on end also made working with me, to be fair, a near impossibility. So that was my life for 2 years. But it's less uncommon than you think. We've collated some numbers. These are global numbers, by the way, and I'll point out where they're not in the following slides. But 2 in 5 young people, and that means between the age of 10 and 24, will have a chronic illness. This means an illness that lasts for longer than 3 months, and that's the World Health Organization's definition, and that will have an impact on your life. So that means that something will be impaired. And people nowadays live longer and longer with conditions. So as we treat them much better now than we used to medically, you also live longer not only with your disease, but with the side effects and with the consequences of the treatments. And oftentimes, these then go accompanied by depression because obviously you're in a new situation. And especially if you're an adolescent, you're just trying to find yourself. You're trying to find your spot in life. And if that is taken away from you, what's left? What do you do? Who am I now with this illness? Is this going to be it forever? Is this my life? The most common culprits are cancer, diabetes, asthma, ADHD, but there's many others that make up these numbers that you can see here. And a lot of people don't even get treated for it because they can't afford it, they don't have access to it, never mind really working through the emotional stuff. So similar in my experience in those 2 years, for one, I wasn't really taken seriously by the doctors, you know. I mean, it's an itch. It's not like it's a life-threatening condition. And so I really didn't feel like I could talk to anybody in my family about it either. And I had, with my friends, you know, the first thing is, how do you feel? Well, what do you tell them? Like hell, basically. And so these kids here also, we've done some research, and we have seen that these kids reach out online. So over 56% of adolescents that have a chronic illness say that they don't like talking to their parents or their friends about it because they feel like they have to be brave. You know, the first thing that people say is, it will be okay again. It'll be all right. We'll get through this. We'll make this happen. And so you do as I did. You power through, right? You work through it. You go to all the meetings, from Western to Eastern doctors, to traditional to alternative. I mean, even miracle healers. I called everybody. And nobody could find out what was wrong with me. I was completely healthy, apparently. All tests said nothing. And so I think that if you look at online now, where it's much more comfortable for youth to reach out online, and it's also largely anonymously, that's been a big help. So we've looked at some of these numbers, and what the kids are saying is 2 in 10 of them are reaching out because they want some medical advice. 3 in 10 want to share an experience and share their experience with others. And then there's some personal advice that people ask, like, for example, you know, I'm at my school and I don't get a specific room to administer diabetes because my school says they don't want to see us condoning being shut up. So those kinds of questions and answers were the things that we found in harvesting over 6 million conversations of teens online. Now, if you want to help those teens, then you need to figure out, okay, how do we do this, right? What's the right way? These teens need tools, and this is where we come in. We're a small nonprofit organization. We're based in Silicon Valley in the US. We do work globally. Our team actually is spread out, since even though we're small, we're spread out through various countries. And we provide information. We have a blog for parents and professionals. We have a blog for teens with teen stories from sick teens for sick teens. And we also have a social media community that we build where we talk about these topics, where we make sure these people know that it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to feel off every once in a while. And it's also okay if you don't have a psychologist or you don't want to go to a psychologist. That's also okay. You have to find out what works for you when you're dealing with your illness. The other thing that we do is we do a lot of research. So we look at what makes these teens able to cope with what they're going through. So the word resilience is very important to us. How do you think about resilience? How can you measure that? You know, how can you make a person confident enough to speak up, to tell their story? How do you make a person willing to look into themselves and see how they can be helped, right? Because a lot of that comes from yourself and how you can help yourself. And so we do a lot of looking into things like mindfulness or emotional awareness, or how do you get a positive outlook on life. We all know we're in the gaming industry, right? Gaming is up and coming, and it's been here for a while already. And there's these numbers, by the way, these are from the US. So they say that by the age of 21, the average American will have played 10,000 hours of digital play. That's half the time that they actually spend in school. So it's a lot. They play about 2 hours on the weekend on a daily basis and 1 hour during the week. And 30% of that time is spent on mobile. And I'll get to why that is important for us. So we as an organization, we started out with online tools as a website, information, but also our founder, Sherry Sobrato-Brisson, had a brain tumor when she was just 24. And she saw firsthand that there's no tools out there that really spoke to her, that helped her outside of the appointments that she had in the hospital. A lot of times when you're in treatment, when you're at the hospital, getting psychological help is easy. But what do you do when you go back home? And how long will you have that? Can you have access to it? Do you have the money for it? Do you have the time? Or do you even want to go? And so she decided when she had a 5% chance of survival. So when she survived 25 years, she decided, I want to do something about this. And she wrote a book, a self-help book that took questions that are normally asked in therapy, made them a little bit more children-friendly, and also put them, as you can see here, on really interesting backgrounds to make it less daunting to talk about things like death or medication or, having your life changed forever. And she distributed the book, over 35,000 copies of it, to more than 200 hospitals in the US. But she was starting to run into a problem because she thought 35,000 copies as a non-profit organization, I mean, it's expensive, it's a thick book, you have to send it everywhere, right? But also, it's a lot to send around, it's a lot of effort, etc. And so she reached out to me and said, Rosie, you're in technology. Your background is tech, so can you help me with this? I want to digitalize this book. And so I said, sure, I'll look into it. So I did some research, I looked up some stuff, and she said, well, here's what I want to do. I want to take this book, and I want to just make it digital, like a PDF book, like an e-reader, or maybe an audio book. And I asked her, well, who do you want to reach? And she said, well, mainly this one I want to be more for teens, because we've noticed that the book was appealing to more younger children, and that a lot of professionals were working with the children in therapy. And I just looked at her and I said, teens with a self-help book as a PDF? I don't think that's going to work. So I said, I think what you need to do is you need to make a game, because as we've seen, those numbers, that's where the teens are at, right? So you should make a game. And her question was, and I don't even know if all of you know this again, but like Pong? I was like, no, we've moved on from that. Games can do a little bit more now. And so she turned around and said, okay, show me, do it. And that's how I got to be part of this project. So here's a little introduction video of Shadow's Edge, which says it shorter than I could.
Makes me think of a black period, a dark period in your life, and you're at the edge of it. You want to get out of it, but you're not there yet.
The quest of the player in the game is to bring Shadow's Edge back to life. He does that through journaling and through creative expression.
The game is going to ask you some questions, so that you can dig deep and understand what's going on inside. Do I really love myself? What do I want my doctors to know about me? And what am I not saying? A little more than just a distraction, or a little bit more than medical medicine.
It'll help you in so many ways, like more ways that you could possibly understand.
So in the game, you have a quest, obviously. There's a city called Shadow's Edge, and Shadow's Edge has just been hit by a storm. And you have to save it. And the way to do that is to go around town, find the pages of a missing journal, and answer the questions that are on them, much like you would in therapy. Obviously, we've reworded them a little bit from therapists. But from the very start, we worked with psychologists on figuring out not only those questions, but what about the rest? Because there's more to a game. We didn't want to just have a gamified journal. We really wanted to have a game world with characters, with storyline, with mastery, autonomy, everything that is needed, I think, and that shows the potential of how games can help impact. And so we worked with psychologists on the world and what that looks like. We looked at the levels that we wanted to do. So in the game, you go through 3 levels, and they sort of mimic the journey that you're on when you have an illness. The first one is disruption. A disruption, something just happened, right? You've just been diagnosed, for example, or you had an accident. You just found out you had a rash on your arm, and it's more serious than you thought. And that means that something has changed and your world is disrupted. And a lot of times you do as I did. You power through, right? You just do as you did before until that doesn't work anymore. And that's when you enter the second stage, which is disillusionment. And you start giving up. Because what I didn't tell my friends and my family is that I'd been asking doctors, can you just put me down for, a couple of days? I need to sleep. Can you sedate me? And I was actually getting to the point where if they weren't going to do it, I was going to do it because I just couldn't stand it anymore. So disillusionment is sort of a space where sometimes you're optimistic, sometimes you're down, and everything in the game mimics that as well. So in disruption, we have stuff flying around, the storm just happened, everything is dark, everything's depressive, lots of colors, red, gray, and dark. In disillusionment, the dust has settled on the town and things are a little bit lighter, but there's a drizzle, a constant drizzle that never changes. And then the third phase is discovery, which is when you start figuring out what you're going to do now and you start incorporating what happened to you into your life. And so in discovery in the game, as you can see from some of these things as well in the background, it's much more green. The weather has changed by then. Your progress is actually changing the city. So apart from the metaphors, you as the player have a direct impact on the world. As you start finding the journals and answering the questions on them, something will happen in the world as you type and as you write. A flower will appear, bugs will come back, animals will come back, lights will go on in the window, scaffolding will show up, the buildings will start repairing themselves. The music will change, the weather will change. Everything really changes over time, both as you pass through phases, but also just really for direct actions in the game. On top of that, every time you write, you also get tools to color your world. And these are some of the screenshots from our players that they've made in the game. So you get spray cans to create graffiti and stencils, because I can't really draw, so I use stencils and stickers. And you can create beautiful art with that. And as you start doing that, you can also share that with others in the game. So at some point, you unlock a device that we call Shadowgram. And in Shadowgram, you can take a picture of your world, like here, and then you can put it out to others. And just like you would in an Instagram, you can comment, you can leave messages with it, you can like it, you can put filters on it, etc., etc. And so we, from the first start, not only worked with psychologists, but with teens that had chronic illnesses. The very first drawing of a character, which, by the way, looks nothing now like she did then, they gave us feedback because, who knows what a teen thinks except a teen, right? So we wanted to make sure that we really incorporated what they wanted into the game. We did numerous focus studies, but also testing on-site. We did online surveys, etc. We had more than 800 touch points with the teens during the development of the game. And as they started giving us feedback, they also started sharing with their family and with their friends. And as they started sharing with their family and with their friends, they started telling us, you know what, this really helped me, and it's really nice. And it's not only a serious game, but it's also serious fun. So that was great. We were really happy. But now, we went to hospitals and we said, look, we've got this great tool. It's already helping teens, right? So we want you to also use this. First thing they said, why a game? I don't get it. And so we said, well, think of it as a self-help book. but just in the form of a game. It's basically the same thing. You've been using our book, Digging Deep, for five years almost now, so it's the same thing. And they said, yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, this could go wrong. And said, we don't know what this is like. We have to try this out ourselves. And so we said, well, we still believe in this because we think gaming has a great potential to help people change behavior in a very positive way, because you can experiment without judgment. You can try out things that you then incorporate into your real life. You can be autonomous and in control of where you're going in the game, and hopefully that also comes back. Plus, if you add world, characters, and storyline together, it's a very immersive way of bringing across a message and a story. And people started telling us also that in getting that feedback of what those characters went through in the game and what the characters were like when they're in the certain phase of the journey, that they felt, this is exactly what's happening to me. And so we still believed in it, but now we had to prove it. So what we did is we did a study, and it was an in-house study. We had an external institution do research on how do you measure resilience, because that's problem number one, right? We wanted to know, did we have an impact? So resilience is made up of 7 different factors, and of those factors, the ones that after the study were most impacted were a positive outlook on life, optimism, and emotional regulation. There's a couple of other factors that also were impacted, but those we saw really great potential. The nice thing about that is we had 55 players only. We had 100 players start, but it's chronic illness people. So, of course, some of them had to drop out, they had treatments, etc. So we had 55 patients complete the study. They got a baseline study of how they felt in all those areas. They did an end study after 6 weeks of playing 3 times a week for 20 minutes. They kept a daily diary of how they felt. They shared screenshots with us. And they also had a weekly check-in with a psychologist that asked them questions about how they felt as they were going through the process and how the game helped move them and how the game helped move them through their journey. And we started to see that was really positive results. And so we went back, of course, to the hospitals and said, look, see, told you, it's working. And I said, yeah, but that's 55 subjects, and I mean, we're in America, we could get sued, right, for playing a game. Imagine that. Awesome. So, I don't know. So we said, okay, fine, we'll take that challenge too. We've taken every other challenge. So we're now running we've issued a grant, and there is a full clinical year-long study with Lurie's Children's Hospital, one of the top hospitals in the US, in Chicago. And they're cooperating with an institution, the Osher Institute, and with a university as well. And we're now about 6 months into the study. They're running this with 174 cancer patients. These are cancer patients between 17 and 24, and they're in remission. You'd think, well, that's a good thing, right? That's positive. But according to them, that's when most of their patients actually become depressed. Because now that the pressure has gone down of the constant cancer treatments, that's when it starts. What do I do with my life? Where do I go? What if it comes back? Why do I even go study? I mean, it doesn't matter anymore, right? And so they've started playing, and funny enough, they started seeing the exact same results that we did. Players were more optimistic, were more able to handle if they had a down day or an up day, basically. And also, they felt more inspired because they were playing the game. They felt more connected to others because they started realizing there's more others like me out there. And like me doesn't necessarily mean that it's just in cancer patients, but there's others dealing with the same subjects. And so we went back to the hospitals again and said, look, this is 6 months in. And they're like, no, it makes total sense. We can put some flyers up and such, but we're not going to be able to use it in therapy because, really, I mean, what you should do is you should do an FDA-approved game. And we're like, right, okay. It'd be really nice if you just said all that stuff from the beginning, right? Anyways, sure. So we went back and we've now issued 2 more grants because part of the FDA process is very long, by the way, and incredibly expensive, but part of it is a lot of research. So that's the process we're in now, and that's what we hope to do, and that brings me to what's next. So we've got more dreams, right? Because there's always the next game, there's always something new. One of the things we get asked a lot is, this is for chronic illness. Now, you've just seen the numbers, it's 2 out of 5, right? So you'd think it's a big enough audience, but still, on top of that, there's also mental health conditions, for example, and 50% of mental health conditions are actually diagnosed by or show up by age 14. So it's a perfect timing to do other things as well. So we want to create the same Shadow's Edge, but with psychological content specifically targeted to certain illnesses, like mental health, like refugees, maybe, siblings, perhaps, something for grief, that where, if a family member, for example, died. We've got plans there, and we have some partners that are willing to help us with those. And then we also want to create an augmented reality tool because we think there is a lot of potential there to actually get the patients engaged within the hospital, to get them out of their bed. So we're envisioning something sort of like a Pokemon Go meets geocaching, where you can use the current Shadow's Edge, you can create your graffiti, and then you can actually decorate your room with it, or the family room in the hospital, and other people that have the AR version could see that when they come by. So again, foster community, etc. Then we have a virtual reality app, and virtual reality, each of these tools that we're looking at has a superpower as a technology, right? And virtual reality, we believe, is really good at creating empathy and letting them see what it's like if you are in that situation. If you feel like I did, like your skin is burning, like you just crawled into an oven at full heat. And those kinds of things with visualization could be really strong points. And at some point, we also think that we should just create awareness that this exists and that it's a huge issue. And so we're thinking about a console version that's a little bit more entertaining, but also still provides information. Because when we started looking at what's out there, we found a lot of apps that monitor your disease. We found apps that look at sugar levels in diabetes, or we found apps that sort of gamify taking your medication on time. We found some applications, we found games actually, where you could shoot your cancer, which felt really good for a minute, but didn't really change anything long term. And so when we then started developing our version, we decided, okay, this is a beginning, but we really want to do more. So years later, I still have my condition. Sometimes for years on end, I have nothing. And then other times, like in these last 7 months, for 7 months in a row, I, on a daily basis, want to take a razor to my legs or my arms and make sure that it hurts instead of itches. It's not that I set out to create a game because I have a chronic illness, because that's what my business partner did. She had a brain tumor, and this is her baby, her creation, if you will. But when she told me what she was doing, I knew I had to join that quest. And I saw the potential that games have to really make a difference here. So to get back to your question, is gaming the next pill? Can it heal somebody? Of course not. But teens are on mobiles and technology anyway, so why not harness that power of technology, entertainment, and storytelling to meet them on their turf? And we're proving that games can make a difference, that they can give them self-confidence, that they can change behavior, that they can help them communicate with themselves and help them reach out to others. And we've also seen that it enhances the experience of being in a community through gaming. So while we can't heal somebody, we can certainly give them tools to better cope with what they're going through. So yeah, this was my talk, and I'm very happy that I was able to be here. Thank you very much. And please join our community, download it, and give the game to somebody you think might be able to benefit. Thank you. and he didn't even break out the chocolate.
So, Rosie's story is pretty much amazing, and it's quite inspiring. What's being done by her and her team, and I had the opportunity to meet a lot of them, and they are all amazing people. And we're so fortunate to have her here at Big Festival. So now we have time for questions. So I would love to invite you to really think about great questions, because we do, ladies and gentlemen, we do have Swiss chocolate. So
I mentioned I'm from Switzerland, right?
yes, she's from Switzerland. So the thing is, she has privileged access to amazing chocolate. And for our, happiness and love, she brought a box of a chocolate that actually does not exist anywhere else. So if you really want Swiss chocolate, you're gonna have to think hard and ask amazing questions. That said,
Yeah, we just to make sure that we equaled score. So we have 5 bars.
yeah.
So the 5 most interesting questions are the ones that get the chocolate.
Okay, so
And he's the judge.
I'm the judge, so you're doomed. So questions, hands up.
All right.
Okay, you can do the question in Portuguese, and I'm gonna, if you speak English, you can go directly into English, but you can do the question in Portuguese and I'll translate, okay?
Então, eu queria primeiro dar os parabéns. Assim, eu sou mãe de um adolescente que joga muito, e uma das questões que me preocupa bastante é a maneira como retratam, especialmente as mulheres nos jogos, e a maneira como os jogos são violentos. E também a gente sabe que a indústria pornográfica aí também reina na internet. E aí você vê uma iniciativa como a dela, de tirar o chapéu, realmente. Obrigada. Eu queria que ela falasse um pouco sobre isso, sobre essa confiança, né, que o jogo traz, e o meu medo como mãe, né, que ele conquiste, os pedófilos, por exemplo, né, que conquistem a confiança das crianças através dos jogos, né, especialmente os meninos, eu vejo muito expostos a esse tipo de coisa, e as meninas, por outro lado, tendo que, se gostam de jogar, têm que se mascarar, muitas vezes, com um perfil de menino, e sempre retratadas de uma maneira caricata e não muito positiva, no meu ponto de vista. Queria que ela falasse um pouco sobre isso.
Okay, so first, what's your name?
Cristina.
So Christina here, she wanted to congratulate you because of all the work and everything you're doing. It's so hard in the middle of all the games that we have, a lot of violence, a lot of scenarios where the violence is the main issue, and how the whole game designs are usually around adventures and things like that, and they're not they're not especially did not do any kind of support in terms of what we're feeling and how to make you feel better, and she wanted really to congratulate you about this, and the question is, what is your opinion about the relationship between what is in our industry, what is happening in our industry right now, where gaming is over sexualized. There's a lot of the women projection into games is also very oh, okay, it's gonna be okay. So yeah, so it's she wanted to really understand what is her opinion about women's in games, and how how can we improve that and make a safer place for our children to play online with everything that is going on in the internet right now?
So, first of all, I think that a lot is already happening. There's so many more games out there now than 10 years ago that have figured some of that out, at least. Of course, yes, there are still stereotypes, but there's still stereotypes in movies. There's stereotypes everywhere. Would I love that to change? Absolutely, and that's part of why we make games, that are a little bit different, right? And somewhere offline, I can tell you the story that I started on yesterday about creating this character and how difficult that is in the US to create any character, because everything is offensive and you have to watch everything. So I think that it's in our hands as game developers to create new role models. People like us. I'm certainly not somebody that's out there as a leader and as a role model. I'm just a normal person making games. Now, for the sexualization that you said and the violence in there, I think this is something that won't go away completely. I don't think that that's the way. But I think if we make more creative games that focus on maybe alternative goals, like not shooting people, but maybe getting forward by combining things and puzzling out a way that the whole society is doing well as a society within the game, I think that will help a lot. I think it's in our hand to change that. Well, the Yeah, but I mean, what impressed me was there's a guy called Rokhorst, and he had a nice little book when I started out in gaming, which was only a few years ago, and what impressed me was what he said. It's the mechanics, the quests, and what you do with the game is what is important. Now, of course, at the moment we have our tools still, right? And the tool, as you say, if you open Unity or you open a character program, the default is there. But we can change that. I mean, that's how you modify character. Can we now influence already that these software companies that create the easy tools for us to create the characters? I think that'll be years. I'm honestly not a fan of policies. Honestly not. Because I've seen what happened. I was at HP and I got a job as a manager because I had boobs and my team just would not work with me. So I'm really not for policies. So I'm the wrong person to ask for that, I think.
Could you move to the next question?
Yeah, sure.
Boa tarde, meu nome é Leonardo. I have a question. How does your game interact with children? Is this it uses like nested fear or self-authors psychological problems? Eu vou traduzir, tá? É que eu tô falando inglês pela primeira vez. Tem uma pergunta.
Pode falar em português.
Tá. Como o seu jogo interage com as crianças que têm esse problema de saúde, como ansiedade, medo de si e outros problemas psicológicos. E como ele desmistifica essas coisas, sabe?
It's a good question. There's a few things that our game is not really predestined for. For example, severe trauma. Because you don't know, even if you ask questions as a psychologist, what comes up when you ask these questions. But specifically anxiety, which is a lot of times an early phase of getting into a more serious mental condition, is something that lends itself well to this, because the way that the psychologists have put the questions together is what you would get in therapy, but it's at your pace, under your control, at your speed when you answer what. And they're formulated in a very friendly way and very calm way, if you will. So that combined with also the therapeutic part of creating art is actually helping for anxiety specifically. We've had a lot of patients with anxiety that reacted very, very well to the game.
I'm gonna give you a chocolate. because she said good question.
Parabéns.
You just want a chocolate.
Parabéns. A minha pergunta vai muito na questão do contexto. Como é que você trabalhou a interconexão entre médicos, psicólogos e pacientes? Como que você captou isso para ter resultados melhores, né? E se você falasse um pouquinho mais dos problemas que você teve com o FDA, eu acho que isso, né?
So we're not in the FDA process yet, right? So we're still in the pre-stages of getting some things done so that you can even start with the whole process. But to your question about how to work with the psychologists, etc., we were very fortunate. For one, our founder, Sherry Sobrato, has studied psychology and worked with kids and teens for a long time. That's how she was able to write the book also. But we had some very, very helpful psychologists from various different fields in the US that really dedicated time. So they sat in on some of our user surveys, they sat in on our focus groups. They had endless questions over badly cooked dinners of mine. And we really worked. I learned a lot from that because I have no background in psychology whatsoever. But they were really dedicated in helping us for a very long time. And I think the other thing that helped was very early on what we were able to do with the hospitals is focus groups and asking questions to patients. So we really had patients together with their doctor discuss the game, discuss the character, discuss the questions. We also, for every question that the psychologists put together, we then went back to the teens and said, okay, they said this, but how does this work for you? You know, is it helping? And we made sure that we had more than 100 answers to every single question if that was relatable for the teen that had a specific illness. And those were through the board. I mean, we had everything from amputated limbs to cancer to cystic fibrosis, anxiety, depression, clinical depression. We had a lot of different ones. So when we knew that a certain percentage of the questions spoke to everybody, we knew, okay, this is good, not just psychologically solid, but this question actually resonates. And the other thing that I would say also is we've been very grateful. You saw these video with our patients. Those are some of our beta testers that went through the study. One has cancer, one has diabetes, the third one has severe depression, and that's no secret. They've also written blogs for us. So we were very lucky with both the psychologists and the teens that they worked with us in the process and were willing to actually outside share to others how the game had helped them, and that helped a lot. But I can also tell you, I mean, it was an immense amount of hours on our side and our team, and we minimized the impact on the developers. But our team, our core team from the foundation, it was horrific for a year.
Olá, boa tarde. Parabéns pelo projeto. Eu gostaria de saber, eu sou analista de dados, eu gostaria de saber se tudo que vocês coletam no jogo, se isso serve se vocês fazem algum estudo, alguma tratativa disso, se de repente o jogo tem algum caráter de diagnosticar e de repente, poxa, esse player aqui está numa situação mais difícil, eu vou encaminhar ele para um grupo próximo, alguma coisa assim nesse sentido. Gostaria que você dissesse um pouquinho sobre isso.
Yeah, so yes, we do collect data, but we don't use it yet. There's one exception for the studies. For the studies, we look at the factors of resilience, but also we concretely, and this has been approved with parents and everything, we look at what the teens have written in their journal so that we can look at what themes are reoccurring, what words are reoccurring in which stage, etc., and how those help. So we do have that capacity. We don't want to sell our data. We don't want it to go anywhere. What we see in the future maybe that we can do with AI, for example, is figure out certain things like if we have at the moment we have 5,000 players. So if we have like 10, 20,000 players and we start to have some data, do we see that 80% of them say the word sad, for example, those types of things. But we really want to keep it anonymized because what you have to understand is this is people's diaries. You know, this is me on a bad day saying screw this world, right? And we don't want to interfere with that. This is it's a trust that they give us. So to your second question, which goes into that, what we do monitor is everything that is shared on our in-game platform Shadowgram. We do monitor that. We've got people monitoring it. We also have an algorithm looking at it. Now, if there's a penis drawing on the wall, I mean, for Christ's sake, it's graffiti, right? So that's fine. But we do monitor for like backlinks to things or advertisement, or you never know, something might sneak in, or like if there's non-positive comments in the drawings, those kinds of things. So that part we do look at, and we also analyze how often does that come. And I say this specifically because we had an incident around Christmas last year where the same player posted three different things. And at those three, we then had the alarm clock going with, oh, hold on, there's something wrong here. And in that case, we did reach out. We reached out through email. We gave them links to some support groups, and unfortunately we can't see. They didn't reply. I mean, teens never reply to email. I can tell you that. So it's a tricky thing. But we did see other drawings in Shadowgram afterwards. So we do have that option. We also for the players that were in our beta studies, we had some cases where we shared information with their parents depending on what the condition was that they had. So one had a mild form of Asperger's, for example, and then we shared that data with the parents so that they could make sure that everything was all right.
How do you deal with toxic in the community? It's complicated even for big companies like Riot, and in the case when you're in a low place already, if you have to do with toxic, it can be really disastrous.
It's surprising, actually. We've not had one case at all yet. I think that because of the type of audience we have, that helps, because it's generally people that are in a bad spot and that generally want to help other people. Now, of course, it's not fun if you have cancer and you're diagnosed stage 4 and somebody else is in remission, right? And they post something nice. Obviously, something can happen. But for what we did there in Shadowgram is you cannot actually really by words comment. You can only give positive feedbacks in different like little emoticons with so helpful, or here's a hug, or been there, done that, or never mind. Or you can paint something, right? And then post that. That helps a lot.
Hi, I would like you to explain a little bit how was it to combine the fun factor with the mental support. I imagine it was a little bit harder to do that.
Yeah, it's I think that's a chocolate question. It's a new question.
It's a
Never had that question before. Really good. So firstly, I can say I've been in tech for 25 years. I have never in my life cried as much as on this project, and it's been heartbreaking to see some of these players' stories and what they go through. It's heartbreaking to see stuff on Shadowgram saying at Christmas, illness doesn't take a holiday, that kind of stuff. So we've constantly had to figure out how do we have not only our content, like the characters and everything, but also content from our players that's sometimes very positive and very, very negative. And how do we actually make sure that it still fits in the same world, right? So I think the way that we solved this was with the levels and the stages they're in, they actually match how you go through your journey as you get better. And this actually tends to be, we just see this in painting. So you saw some of those screenshots. We tend to find that the more negative postings, like somebody posted something about my illness may not be visible, but it doesn't mean I'm okay. Those types of messages that people write on walls in graffiti tend to be more in disruption and disillusionment, whereas in discovery, people tend to create graffiti that is more positive and looks forward and, is about things like, repeat after me, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, those types of things. So some of it has really fallen into place itself, if you will. But it's still with the characters, and this is why I said before, the characters look nothing like what they did at the beginning now, and that's part of that, where we wanted the characters to be relatable. So one character, if you do play the game, you'll see she's always depressed. But we also wanted to make sure that we don't make it depressive, right? Because that was the part that we had at the beginning. The feedback was that the world was just too depressive. Nobody wanted to play the game. So I think, again, the contact with the teens helped us a lot. And some of it just solved itself, basically, because of the process.
Okay, people. So we have time for one last question. So make sure this is the one that, it's a chocolate question.
I'm happy also afterwards outside to answer your
Yeah,
question.
no, she's not gonna answer anything because
But
it's
who do we
I'm
pick?
kidding.
Who do we pick?
Yeah, she's gonna be available.
Bom, primeiramente, parabéns pelo projeto. Já acompanhei a palestra das mulheres nos jogos, então a história dela é sensacional e particularmente eu acho que dá força para muitas outras mulheres também que estão entrando nessa área. Referente ao projeto, é um projeto sensacional, mas existem muitas doenças que foram colocadas, desde crônicas, mentais e afins. Como que foi, dentro do desenvolvimento do projeto, conseguir trazer que o projeto abrangesse todas essas diferentes doenças, que são várias, e justamente esse ponto de você atender eles de uma forma que não causasse, digamos assim, um gatilho para aquela pessoa, que o projeto quisesse ajudar e não trouxesse a questão. Porque no projeto de vocês, durante a pesquisa, tem todo o acompanhamento com os psicólogos e tudo mais. Mas a galera que não tem esse acompanhamento e que está fora, qual que foi o cuidado, o processo para prevenir qualquer coisa?
Let me say something before. I suffer from a chronic disease. I suffer from chronic
Basically,
anxiety.
everybody that's involved in the project, right?
And everybody that's involved suffer from something. And I love that you spoke about emotional triggers, because I have panic, and this is such a key issue. And the game treats that, and expressing yourself is so important. So let me give you a chocolate. This is a chocolate question, ladies and gentlemen. And now Rosie.
So there's certain things we exclude, like I said before. If there's patients, for example, that had very severe accidents or sexual abuse or other things, for example, that's something we exclude. We also exclude medical mental health conditions, such as schizophrenia, etc., just because simply these questions probably won't even apply to them. But in working with the psychologists, we went through... Let's do this another way. So what we did know is a lot of psychological content exists to help people with various issues. And what we looked at with the psychologist is no matter which condition and no matter what are the common themes that you have, and what are the common questions that you could ask that help that. So I'll give an example of one of my favorite questions in the game, actually, is that the masked me. And in there it says, something like, now that you have an illness, or now that you have a condition, do you feel like people don't see the real you anymore, but instead they see something else? And can you describe how that makes you feel? Can you describe, what you think they see versus what you see and what you want them to see? And can you then spray paint that mask on the building, which sort of is very similar to what psychologists do with giving you a balloon and then letting it go, right? So the questions are formulated in hopefully a positive way, and we work with psychologists very hard on making sure that we don't do things that sometimes happen in therapy, where they say, "Now that you're dying, how do you feel?" Right? I've had questions like that. I've seen questions like that before. So we looked at all the literature, we looked at the common themes, we looked at what are the questions that everybody asks, and then we checked with psychologists, what do you think the ramifications are if we ask this question? And then in the beta study, and that's exactly why we had the psychological interviews for 6 weeks, every time we had players play, we then afterwards first had to make a diary a player's diary where they didn't put in, what they played, but how playing made them feel. And then we had a follow-up interview with a psychologist. We had one case where we had a player, and she also wanted to do a video. And funny enough, creating the video with us to actually talk about her experience outside of the game, that was a trigger. And then we immediately also helped her with, you know, a psychologist that could answer questions, etc. But the game itself didn't trigger it. So I think that, while obviously you can never be sure, but then again, you know, I don't know, for example, what triggers my skin, if it's stress or food or whatever. Nobody knows, right? So there's always ways. But we really try to make sure that we base this on existing literature and then went over it with psychologists and then tested with the kids. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, everybody, so much for so many questions. I mean, it's really amazing. Thank you.
Obrigado mesmo. Muito obrigado. Bom, queria agradecer primeiro vocês pela audiência, por virem aqui, por conversarem com a Rosie. I wanted to say thank you to Big Festival, thank you to Apex for helping us bring Rosie down here to talk about this amazing project. And lastly, since we're talking about accessibility and we're talking about making people feel, included and all that, the last chocolate is not going to the audience. The last chocolate is going to our interpreter of the Brazilian Sign Language. That makes sure that every single one understands what's going on. So she's available for more questions outside. Please note that we have some press waiting for her. She's like a celebrity or so, like she's like Miley Cyrus or it's amazing. Of all the celebrities. Yes, I mean, really? I hate you. So the thing is, lovely of every single one. So thank you, people.